Welcome to Let's Run Facebook Ads, the Extra Cast with myself, James Urquhart. And today we're joined with Matthew Hunt, Matthew, welcome to the podcast. And I'd like you to introduce yourself today, if that's okay. So welcome.
Thanks, man. I appreciate being here, James. I'm Matthew Hunt. I'm the founder of Automation Wolf, and we help people with demand gen to help grow their B2B businesses. So we work with a lot of agency owners, B2B coaches, and a lot of high-ticket SaaS companies.
Wow. So how did you get into that? How did Automation Wolf get created?
Yeah, it was from scratching my own itch. I had my own problem. So I'm a 3-time agency owner, and the real truth is I sold my second agency in 2018, and I had a non-compete, and so I couldn't do inbound marketing anymore. And so I was like, okay, I'll do outbound. So I basically got into the game of spraying and praying, did that for about a year, and it kind of worked. And then I took a step back and said, okay, what's really working here, and how do we really make this work for companies who are looking to close sales? And I figured it out. I was nice enough to reach out to my network and get 36 clients who said, yes, I will try your beta system, even though you haven't actually built it yet. They gave me some money and I built it out. And so now I have a 3-pillar system that's just called short form, long form, controlled form. And it's a way for people to get discovered, a chance for them to demonstrate their ability, and an opportunity for them to build community around themselves and their brand. And when they do it really, really well, basically what ends up happening is it creates demand for their business, and they can suck at sales and charge more.
Wow. Easy.
Easy.
Easy. So the agencies that you've created and sold, which can I just say kudos, because that's incredible. Yeah, fair play.
Thanks.
What were they doing? What were those agencies? Were they social media agencies?
Yeah, so the first agency I built was in 2010, and it targeted local businesses. So we would help, little tiny businesses, plumbers, local lawyers. I mean, it was just all over the map, but the key focus was local SEO, which of course it branched into a little bit of content, light web design and development, and pay-per-click ads, both on, search and Facebook. So I was a pretty early adopter to all of those different channels. And the good news was, because I was an early adopter, I actually could have success even though I was not very good at it. I just timed the market well. Nobody knew how to be good. And so looking back today, I kind of laugh at my ability and skill set of what I could actually do was very, very low, but it just didn't matter. It was just timing the right market. And then it sort of did the same thing once I got my training wheels off and, 14 and sold that one, I then built a bigger brand website doing the same thing, but instead of focusing on local small businesses, I focused on enterprise clients and sort of mid-tier clients, which I call the Goldilocks zone. So we probably had a dozen sort of big brands for the logo. So I probably shouldn't say their names, but very like Fortune 500 companies, basically, probably even Fortune 100 and Fortune 10 clients. So they weren't actually like our big, those weren't our huge money makers, but they were definitely the logos that got slapped on our website. Where we made all our money were the unknown brand companies that did 250 million to 500 million a year, who wanted to hire the agency who had those big logos at the end of the day. And again, we're still early enough to the marketplace that there's a lot of confusion there that we could do really, really well. And our lead domino was still local SEO, but it led us into the design projects. It led us into running their Facebook ads. It ran us into doing all of their stuff. So it was full service, but just that suite. And what was great about that business was I really learned that, whether you're working on one client is the same amount of work, whether it's a small client or a big client. It's just the big client pays you a lot more. And in fact, the big client's easier to work on too, because they have budgets, they have teams, and they're doing other stuff besides what you do. So not all the pressure is on your shoulders. Where, when you work with a small business, you have a small budget and all the pressure is on your shoulders, and it's the owner's money, not a budget money. And it's so much harder. So I was like, wow, if you're going to build an agency, you might also build one that targets, it's the same work, if not less work, ones that have money and not all the pressures on your shoulder. Because let me tell you something, it's pretty easy to win for a Fortune 100 company to be able to just make some small changes on their website, like an SEO change. Like it's massive wins. You make small SEO changes on a local little business, the impact is very little.
Yeah, you're so right. And actually, it's quite interesting what you said then about the business owners. That's their money. That's their emotional investment as well. And it's so hard,
Yeah.
isn't it? Because a lot of people that listen to this have tried or are trying Facebook ads, and it's their money. It's their. A lot of these are side hustles potentially, or
Yeah.
they're smaller businesses. And when you look at a marketing budget, which you've never really had before, and you go, right, how much do I start spending on Facebook ads or SEO or PPC or whatever it is? On those early stages, it's really hard, isn't it? Because you don't know your metrics to look for, and all you're seeing is money going out the door and going, oh no, will it ever come back? And I think that's where a lot of people stop, because they start and they dip their toe in a little bit, get very nervous, and then go, oh, retract. And I guess for the local SMEs that you did in your first one in 2010, it was really interesting for you, I guess, seeing that change from then to when you got the enterprise clients and gone, wow, this is a different world altogether.
Yeah, well, both were, exactly. So the first one was training wheels, but I'm internally grateful for all those local SMEs who were willing to, you know, risk their money with me so that I could learn, right? And and I didn't disappoint. Like, I worked my ass off to make sure I delivered results for them at the end of the day. I come from a background of a long line of contractors, which would be all like local businesses. And in fact, my first clients, I did the work for free. Like, I literally was family members. I'm like, look, I'll do your marketing. Just like, can you let me do this? And I can even remember some of them at the beginning saying, I had one family member who's like, can you stop, because my phone is not stop ringing, like just take the website down, stop doing what you're doing, I can't think. You're sending me too many leads, leave me alone, right? So I definitely cared to be able to do it, but I still didn't know what I was doing. What I mean by I didn't know what I was doing is I didn't have the marketing foundations down, such as, like, I didn't understand copywriting, I didn't understand funnels really fully, I didn't understand positioning and things like that. And so back then you didn't need to, because in 2010 everything was so new and interesting. Like, just showing up on search was enough, or even, like, when you first started doing Facebook ads, like, it was enough just to be running ads. Like, I ran search ads in AdWords when I was paying like 50 cents per click for keywords like credit card processing, merchant accounts, which now are like 30 to 50 bucks, right? Where I was running ads on Facebook when, like, a click was a penny. Like, it didn't matter what when it was, like, you just ran it and you did well. But as time goes on, what happens is the market matures and things get more expensive, so it weeds out those that are not good at their job. And then two, you have to get better at your job. And so I had to learn the fundamentals, which come back to what most people had already learned if they're really good marketers in advertising, which is understanding things like the 7-hour rule, really understanding branding, really understanding direct response and copywriting. And I'd say that's, now I would say that I'm a much, much better marketer of understanding those things. It's harder now. It's harder now for people. Like, you got to be good now. You can't just come into this and suck.
No, no, you're right. It's last year, I think, was a bit of an anomaly. When you look at probably when you started in 2010 to now, absolutely, that market's matured and it's got a lot harder. Like, there'll always be the old company out there, charlatans or whatever you want to call them, but there'll always be the ones that say they can do it but can't. Last year, we saw a spike in agencies suddenly cropping up all over the place. I'm sure in the US you had the same. In the UK, we had a huge amount of agencies just popping up. And we called it the gravy train, Nick and I, because the amount of money you could make on social last year during the pandemic, especially in the UK, was nuts. Everyone had disposable income. We were locked down in our houses. We had furlough in the UK. I don't know if you had the same over in the US, but everyone had money available. So last year, you could have been probably back in 2010, do anything online. You'd have seen some return of some level. Now we're obviously all coming out of our houses and being able to leave. We're seeing it back to usual, which is hard. It's a tough gig. And what I'm really interested to see is going out sort of the last stages of this year, sort of Q4 going into Q1 next year, actually how the market develops even further. Because obviously, since we've had the iOS update, it's become harder anyway. People now are going to get stretched because of interest rates and all that. It has to happen. We can't just give away free money. How the market develops, and actually, what your point earlier, which is you've got to be a good marketer, and if you don't, you get found out so quickly now, so quickly.
Yeah.
What do you think makes a good marketer? And is it time? Because you said 2010, you were, your training wheels were on, like a lot of people then. What's made you, or the companies that you've produced and then sold, what has made those what they are?
So I think at the end of the day, like, yes, I got lucky with timing. So I think timing and luck has a part to do with it. But of course, like anything, it requires a lot of hard work and care. How we do the small things is how we do all things at the end of the day. And so, you're going to have to put the work in before you get the results. That, once you put the work in and get the results, you know what you're doing, you don't have to spend as much time to be able to do it. So, yes, every time there's like some sort of crunch or a crisis, whatever that there's been crises. Sometimes a crisis is like AdWords changing their rules, or Facebook accounts getting banned, or the algorithm getting updated. Other crises are something like COVID or a financial crisis in 2008. There's always going to be crises, small ones, some in your industry, other times broad ones. This never goes away. They come and go, and they're rolling all the time. But you're right. What's great about them is it does shake out those that either didn't put in the work, right, or are just too not ready for it. So it's this great way of like focusing you to do better. Now, the one thing I can tell you in general is, like, I have seen them all because I've been around for a long enough time. Like, I have seen clients' websites completely drop from the search rankings because of a Google algorithm update. I remember the crunch when they came down with the hammer the first time, of like going, hey man, you have to stop spamming things, okay? And we're going to basically derank you or create, a filter on you for years where you just can't rank, right? Like, talk about like learning the lesson of you can't be single channel anymore. I can tell you how many of my clients quickly learned that, search was not the only way that they're going to survive. They quickly pivoted to learning how to use Facebook ads, social, organic, all of these other things to get a diversified portfolio. I can tell you the same time I can remember watching AdWords accounts getting banned. And I remember watching Facebook accounts getting banned. I remember Facebook organic disappearing, and oh my God, the sky's going to fall in. And then most recently, now we have the iOS stuff where, oh my God, we can't pixel anyone anymore. We can't see what's going on. Well, I can tell you one thing is all of these things have occurred and everything was fine. And things continue to grow just fine, and marketers figure out a way to be able to do things. In fact, the best marketers still understand the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are, there's a process of getting people educated and knowing about your brand, and it comes into these 4 chunks, which is short form, long form, and controlled form, which is what I said my system was before, right? So short form is usually some sort of, content in some sort of way that allows people to discover you. They get to know you, and there needs to be some sort of consistency with it so that they can know you. Because remember, nobody buys from you or your product or service without know, like, trust. No selling can be done until that's been completed as a cycle. So if everybody understands that's what you're doing, that's all marketing is doing, is saying, hey, do we know you? Where are we on that trust meter? Do we like you? Do we trust you? It doesn't matter if it's service, product, what you're selling, it's the same process no matter what. And then what ends up happening is the higher the ticket price of the item, the more time they need to have with you to be able to make a buying decision. And in general, any large purchase, whether it's like investing your money in finances, buying a car, or making like a B2B decision where you're going to invest in an agency or a partner to help you with something that's tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment, requires time and research. And it's called the 7-hour rule. It's not something I created. It's a guy, his name was Dan Priestley, and he wrote a book called Oversubscribed, I think in 2014. And he deduced and did all his research to explain that, look, people need 7 hours with you on to be able to make that buying decision. Now you can shorten that 7 hours by removing friction to getting them that information so that they can make that buying decision. And that's your long form content. But nobody opts into the long form content without the short form content. Especially today, if you think about a news feed, so pay-per-click ads and news feeds on, let's say, Facebook or Instagram, or I don't care where you are, TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn, it's all the same thing. It's a news feed. When we're in a news feed, are we there to listen to an hour-long podcast for James? No. We're in the intent of short form snackable content. Therefore, your content needs to be, when your ads need to be short form. Also, we're not there to be served ads. So if you're in the news feed and your stuff looks like an ad and it ain't short and snackable, it ain't going to work. Mm-hmm. And what we're trying to do is the first mistake people make is they make their ads look like ads, right? Or if you're going to at least make it look like an ad, at least admit it, be like, yeah, this is an ad and here's why. Have some fun with it, right? Like, be transparent with it. People will like your brand a lot more because remember, we don't buy from we don't like. So you might as well be a little bit more transparent, have some fun with it. So two things is, they're making direct response ads when there shouldn't be a direct response offer, right? At that time, it should be a little bit of education. And I find in general, particularly in the B2B niche, we use these little short snackable videos that are 2 or 3 minutes that says, basically, if you like this, you're going to like the longer version over here. And those promoted ads actually don't feel like ads, and you get tons of comments, likes, and all kinds of engagement on your ad for great social proof. And it still justifies the same thing. People still know how to breadcrumb their way to finding what's going on, especially today in today's marketplace. Like, everyone knows how to use Google. I mean, kids talk to their iPad. You don't think that we can figure out how to find your product and service and brand and how to follow you and connect the dots? Totally easy to do, right? So the challenge is they're just using the wrong sort of short form content with their ads and organic content to breadcrumb them up to the long form. The goal is to get them into the long form, because once they have the long form, like a podcast or a webinar or some sort of conversion event, right, that educates them, that's where you start getting the transformation. Now, not everybody's ready to buy from you right now, and that's why it's important that you create a controlled form environment where you can put them in a controlled form environment and you can continue to keep building reciprocity and goodwill with them and turn them into fans, so that when they are ready to buy, you're the most logical choice, and your system can suck at making sales, and you can charge more so that you're not a commodity brand.
How would you do that? How would you keep them in your, I call it an ecosystem. So how would you keep them in your ecosystem without them getting annoyed? The usual stuff. There'll always be people unsubscribe, but do you do that via an email, for a Facebook group? What would you recommend, and what are you seeing working?
Yeah, the best things to do is to think about it as like, try to create an invisible marketing funnel, right? So these Rube Goldberg machines of funnels, the jig is up now. Everybody knows what it is. If you look at ClickFunnels and all the marketers out there, they've ruined it, right? So we know what's going to happen when you put us in an automated webinar. We know what's going to happen when we fucking enter our email here. And the last thing we want you to do is spray and pray us on those things. I find in general, the less salesy it looks and the more realistic it looks as being just a non-marketing event will work great. So I always tell people, usually when you're starting out, if it's B2B, you just need a micro community event, like even something as small as a mastermind dinner. I grew my second agency with these Fortune 500 companies very easily. I just started hosting a monthly CMO mastermind dinner. And I would cold outreach to other CMOs and say, hey, I'm hosting a dinner in Toronto. There's 5 of us there. They're all CMOs. Dinner's on me. We just hang out and help each other out. If I'd reached out cold, said, hey, I'd love to sell you my digital marketing services, they'd be like, screw you, buddy, like stranger danger, right? But birds of a feather flock together, very attractive to them to be around other CMOs. And then we'd have the dinner. At the end of the dinner, they'd be like, hey, Matt, what do you do? And I'd have a good answer for it. And it would always lead to me having the opportunity to throw my hat in the ring, which I never would have had before, or a referral. And even if it wasn't, next time they saw my content, like on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or via email, they're going to pay attention to it because we had that belly to belly situation. So for most B2B business, that's just something as small as they need to do, is just run a mastermind dinner. Now you can also have a Slack group, a Facebook group. It could be Discord today. So a lot of young people on Discord, the gamings, like, there's so many things you can do, but you want to build some sort of community, and you want to make sure the community gives you leverage where you can do one-to-many selling with it. And then you also want to make sure when you create the content in the community that follows what's called like the ACES method, which just stands for authority, connect, engage, and sell. And so authority is a small note of like your authority, but if you just create the community so you can broadcast your messages and beat your chest about how amazing you are, it's not going to work. Remember, it's good marketing is never about you, right? It's about them, your audience, your prospects. And you are the director and producer of the movie that's about them. And the problem is you're making it about you, right? And so when you turn around the other way, you start creating connection pieces, and connection pieces are just things that hit the heart, the gut, or the funny bone that makes you likable. Remember, we don't buy from people we don't know, like, and trust. And then 3 is engage. And engage is just being a really good host and asking questions. You have to remember that your audience, them, want to participate and have the conversations and create the content for you. And when you start changing your mindset from being the talent to being a talent scout, everything changes. So the community can create the content for you. It can be peer to peer. You just happen to be the host. Now, what ends up happening is because you're the host of the party or the event or the podcast, is you have them or other experts come in, but you're the constant. So people come and go and participate, but the only person that everybody remembers is you. And if you look at all kinds of brands today, this is how they've grown, right? Whether it's Tim Ferriss, Joe Rogan, Oprah, you name it, they're experts of absolutely nothing. But what they're really good at doing is inviting people, really interesting people, into their controlled environment with their audience, and the questions are for the audience, not them, to teach them what to look and look out for. And by doing that, they have the law of transference. The authority person who came in, who's the expert, transfers all their authority to them and transfers all their audience to them. So you got to tap into other people's audiences at the same time and other people's authority, which is better than OPM. Like everyone says, use other people's money. No. Use other people's authority and use other people's audiences. Today, the power is in being a media company and in having and owning that media company. We can see this with Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan has more impact with 11 million listeners every single episode that he publishes. You add up in a month, is more impact than CNN has. There's a legacy media and there's a new media. And so that's the other problem when people are doing this. They're not thinking about this, that these communities, if you own the community, it ladders up to a media company. When you own the community and you own a group of people in a media company that know, like, and trust you, okay, then it creates massive leverage for you, because you don't need more leads, more sales, more whatever. That's not what you need. You need more trust and more community. And when you own trust and community, you can do anything, because you can just ask them, what do you want to buy? And then create it, and they'll come buy it from you. This is what Gary Vee does every single day. How is Gary Vee able to launch brand after brand after brand after brand after brand after brand? Because he's focused on building community and trust. That's his number one authority. What's his process of doing it? Short form, long form, controlled form. Know, like, trust. That's all he does. Everything's ungated, remove as much friction as possible, and throw as much money as it possible. The outcome on the other side is you're multiplying and scaling, and you can do whatever the hell you want. And it doesn't matter if you use organic or paid ads. You can use both to get started. And in fact, when you're starting out, a lot of times you need to use paid ads to do it, because organically you don't have any following. But you can take paid ads with this type of stuff, put it on Instagram and get yourself 50,000 followers right away, and then turn your ads off and leverage your organic, because now you have an owned audience versus a rented audience. But you can take the rented and turn it into owned, as long as you have that process of short form, long form, controlled form. You need to have those 3 pillars in place for it to work. And all brands need this. Doesn't matter whether you're Mac selling something as an e-commerce brand, or whether you're B2B selling your agency services for $100,000 retainer per month.
It sounds so easy.
Well, here's the thing at the end of the day, right? It's not easy, and it took 15 years to figure it all out to make it sound easy and make it understandable. So again, someone who can take something confusing and keep it simple and understandable is important. This is the whole idea around marketing again, and having a signature system and understanding the steps and being very clear to do it. But if you notice that everybody who's a really good marketer, they'll always have 3 pillars. The 3 pillars will almost rhyme or have alliteration in them. They'll be anchored to a universal truth that everybody has. They'll also constantly keep stretching the gap to create tension. So at the end of the day, with no tension, there's no action. And so you have to be able to describe your ideal prospects and customers' problems better than they can describe it themselves if you want to earn trust quickly. The way you do that is by being able to say things and articulate things that they're thinking that they don't say out loud. The way you do that is by really deeply understanding their fears and frustrations and understanding their wants and aspirations. When you do that, it works really well. Now you have to stack them both. So you have to think of this like an elastic band. So you take one side of elastic band, you put fears and frustrations on one side. The other side of the elastic band, you put wants and aspirations. If you only talk about wants and aspirations, you have a loose elastic band. If you only talk about fears and frustrations, you have a loose elastic band. If you talk about both, it creates tension in an elastic band. What happens when you let go of the elastic band? Goes flying through the air, right? So you always have to be justifying the two. Now, positioning is the same thing. You need to talk about good versus bad. You need to talk about symptom versus root cause. You need to talk about frequently asked question versus should ask question, right? This is 101 positioning. What is the old way of doing things versus the new way of doing things? The old way of doing things is getting leads and sales. The new way of doing things is building trust in communities. The old way is the legacy media. The new way is podcasting, right? Yeah, you always have to be just, but that's also stretching the gap. And just remember, humans at the end of the day will never change because we're extensions of being a chimpanzee, and we have something called a little lizard brain. And we like to think we're really smart, but we buy emotionally and justify it later logically. And all we're doing is trying to move away from pain towards pleasure. And then what we're trying to do is you hit the pain and pleasure buttons, and then you justify it with some logic that is like universal truth. When you tie the two together, you have massive positioning, and people are going to want to take massive action.
You know what? It's something you said just earlier was about the companies talking about us, it's all about we, and it's so frustrating because something that I harp on a lot on this podcast is it's not about us. It's not about you. It's about your prospect or your customer. And I think it's the number one concern I have with most ads that I see, whether that's PPC, social, email marketing, even to a level. It's all just talking about even video content. Video content, obviously, this year is one of my non-negotiables for every business. They need to have some form of video content. Even something like today, you do a podcast, it takes an hour, bing, bam, boom. There's no excuses for it anymore. But in terms of when companies are talking about themselves, especially in video, sometimes it's always, we were founded in 1982 and, we're all that rubbish. No one cares, do they? I know it sounds really harsh. I've pretty harped on about this too much on this podcast, but it's so no one cares. The prospect isn't there to hear about you. And it's really interesting, actually, what you said about the CMO dinner. You're controlling the controllables. And then that also goes back to what you said earlier about when there's an algorithm change or there's something's gone wrong with PPC or all the rest of it. We all know, or we should do as marketers by now, that we are renting these platforms and these users. We are the worst renters in the world because they can just turn the tap off tomorrow and we're all screwed unless you're controlling the controllables. And this goes down to, especially with paid Facebook ads, people like ClickFunnels and in a way have really harmed the marketing ecosystem because we get sold this dream of, you can turn a Facebook ad or a PPC campaign on today and tomorrow you'll be a millionaire. Absolutely not. I wish it was that easy, but it's not, is it? You can get lucky and obviously don't get wrong, you will get some conversions quickly. But in terms of actually scaling a business properly, you won't be able to do it potentially because you're not in control of the controllables. So with your experience, and obviously you've seen a lot more changes in this market than I have. I come from a data market, Matthew. So there's been a lot of change in my data market in the last 15 years and a bit of pain. I'll be honest, it's the only reason we set up Less Than Social. But you have to, it will still be okay. As long as you're good at what you do, you'll still be absolutely fine. But for companies that are just relying on, let's say, Facebook ads as an example, what would be your message to them?
So look, I think it is important to sort of master a channel at a time. So there's nothing wrong with having one channel, but just note that having a single channel is always super dangerous, right? In any business, because if it goes away, you're challenged. Now, the next thing is, as you're doing a single channel, is you want to transfer that traffic or those lists or those customers that you're acquiring from there, and make sure you move them along to being able to own it, you know. And usually the best way of honestly doing it is as you get customers or clients, whatever, is to delight them and seriously over deliver, because you're are what you really want at the end of the day is an army of advocates, right? Or Jeff Kelly wrote something a long time ago called "1,000 True Fans." I think it's in Tim Ferriss's book, and it's been around for a long time. I think he actually wrote it in 2010. And that's really what you're going for, is you're looking to, as a minimum, build your 1,000 true fans, because everything gets easier when you own it and own the traffic and have the thing. So think about, how do you deliver that as the result versus just necessarily making a sale. Right? So instead of thinking about, I want more sales, or how do we get more customers, think about, like, how do we improve the customer experience? How do we improve the onboarding or their first touches? How do we improve the returning customer experience? You know, if it's an e-commerce website, think more in those terms than necessarily, you know, about getting more. If you do that, you got to remember, it's short-term pain for long-term gain. And so you got to really understand this idea of asymmetrical risk, which is, yes, sometimes you got to go slower before you go faster, but when you do it well, you really have a great foundation, unshakable at the end of the day, that's going to continue to keep going. So, you know, if you look at Amazon example with Jeff took every penny and reinvested it and then some before showing any profits for decades. Decades. Okay. And no matter what the shareholder said, I want money, I want a dividend. No, it's going into R&D to make things faster, or it's going in so that we can afford to pay more for a customer than our competitors can. Because when you can afford to pay more, you can outspend them and put them out of business. And then we're going to do things that don't even make sense, like same day delivery, not even for free. And you're going to put them all out of business. And then we're going to force them to come on our platform to sell their stuff there, because we can do it better for them. And then we're going to, you know, take a percentage of their profits and control it and train everybody that come to us. Like, he had the vision, right? I mean, now there's even an ads network on Amazon, right? So you gotta have that vision. The problem is a lot of us don't have that delayed gratification and have that vision and truly are paying attention to what matters. I guarantee you that Jeff was not thinking about, how do I get more sales and increase revenues? It was more about, how do I improve customer experience? And how do I reinvest this money that I can spend more money than my competitors can to acquire a customer, not less. Everyone always wants, like, lower my cost per acquisition, lower my cost per lead, lower my cost per click. That is ridiculous thinking. You need to think the other way. How can I afford to pay more than everybody else? What do we need to do to make that happen so that I can outspend my competitors? Now you're thinking differently. And you got to remember, when everyone else is zigging zag, like, you got to think bigger. So the whole thing around this, a lot of times, like, for most people that like, most marketing in general is this, or most work for agencies too, if you actually, like, look at it as 100%, there's 4 quadrants, okay, on, like, what you need to do when you're working with people. And honestly, 50% of it all has to do with just stuff in the head. So most people don't have business problems, they have mindset problems. So usually 25% of your effort around this stuff is rethinking your thinking. Like, whatever problem you arise, you can't solve it. You got to solve it with a deeper question before you can get to it. It's called the 5 whys. The other part is really expectation setting. So if you're an agency, your success on having clients and how long you'll have them is all 100% around client expectation setting. It's the same thing with customers. So when you think about experience, it's the same thing. What is your client's experience going to be? How are you going to set it? How do we under promise and over deliver and continually delight, where it's engineered every single week, month, year, there's wins, right? The next part really is is actually just, you know, is really just implementation, and then reviewing what succeeded. Like, very little is actually implementation. And even the biggest brands in the world, they don't do thousands and thousands and thousands of, like, you know, marketing tactics and campaigns. They pick 4 or 5
Mm.
and they just live with that, put their money in it. And the implementation is small, but they did spend a lot of time before they did those 3 or 4 things in the thinking and the expectations and how they're going to measure it, and then how they're going to measure it afterwards, like what success looks like, what are the leading indicators of success versus lagging. And they're very clear about knowing that, hey man, for every 1 lagging indicator of success, we need 2 leading to make sure that we don't have any false starts and we're on the right track. So it really comes down to thinking at the end of the day. Thinking's hard. Being creative is hard.
It is. And something you've said there, which has really resonated with me and actually got me thinking, I'm sat there going, okay, that's an interesting, a really different way of looking at it, is how can I pay more for a customer? Which anyone listening to this now will go, the guy's on crack. What is he on about? But you're right, actually, when you think of it in that way, why shouldn't I be able to pay more for a customer? Because, a lot of customers that we have, and, we work with, like you, some big, large corporates, Enterprise being one of them, Rent-A-Car, and I'm always being bashed. Cost per lead. Why is it increasing? All the the usual stuff, as we all know. But actually, you're right. Why can't they afford to pay more for a customer? And what's the reasons behind that? And there's a lot of people we speak to will look at that short-termism. They'll look at that ROAS. This term ROAS. I'll be honest. I hate it. We use it, internally now and again, but it's not about return on ad spend. It's not about that. It's actually your return on investment, and it's short and long term. And when we propose an agency now, as long as all the statistics we've got within the business or that we're pitching for are correct, we'll give them 1 and 2 and 3 year likely return on investment for that initial spend of whatever that may be. And they look at it and go, wow, in 3 years, yes, we'll have a churn rate of 7%. So actually, if you look at it year on year, yes, we're losing revenue, but actually that loss of revenue is still a fraction of what we paid initially. Yeah. But again, going back to the likes of ClickFunnels and systems alike, in a way, and drop shippers, they've killed us because they've gone, hey, spend £100 and you'll be a multi-millionaire and you'll live off a beach, if only.
Totally. And there's another thing too that needs to be education in general too, is the true cost of inflation within marketing and pay-per-click ads. And it's much higher than the 5 to 7% of CPI inflation that's happening. And the reality is just this, is there's only so much inventory. And as more advertisers come in, the price is going to increase over time. And no one talks about it. And they really do need to future talk about it. Like, hey, just so so they need to understand the concept of inflation first. So the cost of inflation is massive, and what's really bad in some environments, like I think it's Denmark, like when it was really bad and it was increasing so much years ago, where it's like so much a day that you would go to the pub and you would order all your beers right away, even though they would get piss warm before the end of the night, because by the end of the night it would cost you more, right? Well, they also need to understand this too, is that there is some speed and investment to it, because what they spend today is not going to get them the same thing as it's going to get them next year. And so the sooner that they can take that rented traffic and put it into own traffic, the better. So there is something called missed opportunity. So like, if you're going to double down, like your pay-per-click budget is not going to get you the same amount of traffic or customers as it does this year as next year, just for the fact of inflation, no matter what happens with the advertising. And so that they have to understand that. So if they want to go faster, acquire more of them now, then spend more now. Put more money in now, because it's not getting cheaper. You just have more and more people coming in, and there's only so much inventory. So there's only one thing that happens with the price. It goes up.
Do you think that scares a lot of businesses, especially in the B2B world?
It's just a fact, and you have to just educate people about how inflation works and what it is. It's a very real thing that's not going to change. I have been in this business now for 15 years, and I've only seen one thing happen with paid advertising, is it gets more expensive every single year. And if you actually look at the real inflation rate, it's not 5-7% per year. Like, I mean, sometimes it's 100% the cost from this year to last year, depending on the industry that you're in and the inventory of where you are. Trust me, it's cheaper to advertise on TikTok today than it will be next year.
TikTok, we're doing some stuff on there at the moment, and the costs that we're seeing are just
cheap. It's cheap.
it's nutty cheap.
Nutty
It's
cheap. Yeah.
crazy. Yeah, it's
For eyeballs and attention, it's nutty cheap. And what's interesting is, that when you're trying to protect your future, people also understand is they're focused on people who can buy from them now. Really big brands, like the really big ones that never seem to disappear, like Coca-Cola, do you think that they care about customers who are buying from them now, that have the ability to buy from them now? They do not. They're focused on customers who can buy from them tomorrow.
uh,
They're planting the seed of
yeah.
doing that now for tomorrow. And many brands are not necessarily doing that. That's because, again, they're not planning on being around for hundreds of years. It's a different type of thinking. How can I spend more to acquire a customer? How do I market to tomorrow's customers and get ahead of everybody else? Because if I've already planted the seed and owned the know, like, and trust,
Mm,
I'm going to be the logical choice. Because remember, we have these chimpanzee brains. We don't think that much. Thinking is hard. We take the
mm,
path of least resistance and we want to move away from pain to pleasure. And our whatever our circuits are programmed to believe, that to make that decision in an instant is what we're going to do. So again, is really good marketers understand this. And this is why branding actually matters. I used to be a very extremely direct response kind of guy. And I've over the years have moved more and more towards the branding campaign and going, I get it now. If you
mm,
truly want to be a winner and a big winner in a big way and be around for a long time, like if you're in it to win it, you got to understand these concepts, and you got to
mm.
understand branding, how to do it. You got to understand trust and conversions. It's the short-term thinkers who are worried about what is a CPL and a CPC that cost me and all this other stuff. None of that shit really matters. What is the
No.
ROAS? What is the ROAS? Like, get the bleep out of here.
Uh,
You just want to slap those people.
honestly, honestly, it's so frustrating because it is a load of bollocks, I hear this ROAS. We had a legacy client and great guy, but just got so obsessed with ROAS. And I said to him one day, look, it's got to change. We were making the guy a fortune as well. When you looked at actually the return and how many or pre-orders, all that stuff, I said, look, we're gonna have to leave it here now. I'm bored of ROAS. But something that you've just mentioned there, which I've totally forgot, actually going off on an absolute tangent there with the ROAS story. But when it comes to TikTok and these new platforms, everyone jumps on it quickly, and it's which is great. And I do believe everyone needs to go onto these new platforms quickly, especially from a pay perspective, because it's cheap and actually just creating an audience organically as well. It's as valuable. But something you said about the long term and short termism that people have, something we do and something we stress a lot on this podcast is, and it's sort of going back to this renting approach. We're on these systems, we're renting their eyeballs. They can very quickly change the goalposts, especially with things like Facebook ads, because you can see, I want to target mums today of a pot of 3 million, then tomorrow there's only 300,000. You're like, oh no, suddenly that's killed my entire campaign. So what we do a lot here is create content to create your own addressable markets. So rather than going, right, we're going to really, obviously we're going to use Facebook's granularity in terms of what audience you can select, but actually that's not going to be foolproof for us. We're going to create content that's going to create, like you said, the short bites. And if people engage with that content, they're then my addressable market. And we know they're not in my market today. They might be in our market tomorrow, but it's creating those addressable markets. So then later down the line, when they are ready to purchase, you're then the ones they go, got you. And that's why I think actually from a retargeting perspective, it works so well. Because like you said, we're chimpanzees. We see
Yeah.
something, we go away, the kids are crying or you got to sort dinner or whatever it may be. And suddenly
Yeah.
you're back online. Those black jeans are back there. So I need to buy them.
Yeah, totally.
It's just the way it is, isn't it now?
Yeah. Listen, the frequency of things that needs to come up is much higher than people think. I know that everyone talks about banner blindness and ad fatigue. It's somewhat true. Like, listen, you need to change those things because if people are engaged, the platforms aren't going to keep it on there. But at the end of the day, you need to send your message way more times than you think you do before people are ready to buy. And especially if it's high ticket price, just keep that 7-hour rule in your head. When you start going, oh my God, 7 hours of me, that's a lot of time. So then you have to think about, how do I move them along to get 7 hours with leverage without me having to do it at a one-to-one level? Well, that's where it comes from, like doing these things. So just remember this, the 1 minute video leads to the 2 minute video, the 2 minute leads to the 5 minute video, the 5 minute leads to the 30 minute one, 30 minute leads to being a subscriber of the podcast, right? Well, there's a subscriber of the podcast and you're releasing 2 per week. Like all of a sudden in a month, you've done your 7 hours, right? You're like, hey, so you can expedite it on how you want to do it. But if if it's just little tiny ads and direct response ads, and it's a high ticket price item, running ads for your automobile at that level without all the other stuff to get the 7 hours, it's not enough education for them to make a decision, right? So you have to think about what are all those touch points that they're going to want to have. And then also, how do we make this shit really useful where it's not direct response ad? Like, you have to remember, everything that you do, if it doesn't make people more awesome instantly, you shouldn't do it. Like, that's the question you want to do. How do I make them more awesome? Or how do I hit them in the heart, the gut, and the funny bone?
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, we've just signed up a new client this morning actually, and they are in the UK. We've got a stretch in the Midlands. There's a little place called the Cotswolds. It's really nice, old sandstone buildings. And there's a guttering company that do fascias and galvanized steel guttering. So again, quite high ticket, 8 to 10, sometimes 15, 20,000 pounds investment. And we pitched to them a few ideas from trying to create addressable markets, which was trying to keep up with the Joneses, so a bit of humor. When was the last time you looked at your neighbor's guttering? Is yours better than theirs? How to clean your guttering, how to measure your downpipe, all that stuff. And the client went, you're the only company that's pitched something that has got zero to do with us as a business. I said, well, again, because prospects don't care. They don't care about your dad created the business and all, 20 years ago. It's not about you.
Yeah.
But you can even see how that can work. And that can work on any platform, can't it, though? You said, that it doesn't matter if that's on TikTok, if that's on Facebook, Instagram, wherever it may be, on PPC ads. Yeah. The amount of PPC ads that I click on, they still go through to especially for high ticket items, they still go through to a website rather than a landing page where there's no like, trust, case studies, or anything like that. Is the amount of money that's wasted on Google. I'd love to know a stat. Obviously, no one's probably got it, and Google will never release that. But I'd love to know.
Yeah. Well, I think this is the reality at the end of the day is so many companies don't understand the job that people are trying to do. Right. This is why there's the jobs to be done format. And if you haven't learned about it, just Google it to learn it. But it just kind of goes like this. Like, you just have to ask these questions, like, your ideal persona or customer, client, whatever, is when I am ... I wish I could ... so I can ... So for example, like, let's just say you sell drills. Well, no one wants to buy a drill, right? The ideal is when I want to put a hole in the wall, I wish I could easily find the stud so that I can hang my family photo above the fireplace, or so I can stop my wife nagging me to hang the family photo, if you want to go even deeper, right? At the end of the day, so the job to be done is, if you really look at it, is gent wants wife to stop nagging him. He also has a challenge of like not being able to easily find the stud in the wall to be able to drill the hole or put the anchor in or whatever it is. And the other job is really to be able to hang the family photo, but it has nothing with has nothing to do with buying a drill. But everyone's just going to market their drill like this is the best drill and here's all the features and all the other stuff. They don't understand the job that someone's trying to do. And once you understand the job that needs to actually be done, you get to speak to the universal truth. And that's when you start coming up with really interesting creative that punches people in the gut, the heart, or the funny bone, or you're able to describe the problem better than they can describe themselves, or the same thing that people are thinking but not saying out loud. And that's when you get impact from it. So you have to really figure out what is the job to be done, and if you do that, it works really well. Like, Susie doesn't want to buy a black dress because she loves black dresses. She wants to buy the black dress because her sister is having a reunion party in the backyard next month, and her neighbor Sally is coming, who she can't stand, and she wants to make her really jealous because she stole her boyfriend before. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's something deeper down there about that. It's the black dress that makes your neighbor, Susie, super jealous that you look so good in it. Or that anybody looks so good in it. Like, you want to just find something that's really interesting and tell that story. And when you tell that story, people really connect with it, and they're going to share it, and they're going to It's going to go from being rented traffic to own traffic, and you're going to build your community and your fans, right? So
yeah, there's something that you've said which I'd love to end on is the universal truth. I think if anyone's listened to this that are running ads, most of you are who are listening to this anyway, is what is the universal truth for that product? And multiple companies have got multiple products and services. We know that whether it's B2B or it's B2C, it doesn't matter. What's the universal truth? Because once you figure that out, it's pretty easy. It is, like I said, we've come from a data background. We're very analytical. So when we've come into the social space, everyone's gone, oh, copy, creative, which we have done because of our data background with email marketing and the like. But I've seen so many people focus and worry about their brand. And I've gone, forget the brand. What's the problem? What are we trying to fix here? And they've looked at you, with these wide eyes and gone, it's nuts. And it's lovely, but you've got to find out what that universal truth is. And the way you've articulated that, Matthew, I'll be honest, is better than I could even imagine doing in any sense. So I want to end it there and just say thank you for coming on. You've been a gent. But if anyone wants to hear more about you, because we do have people here that are very much B2B led, where can they find out more about you?
Yeah, if you're an agency owner or a fractional CMO or a business coach, or you run a B2B SaaS company, I'm pretty sure I can help you. And the easiest way to get in touch with me is to go to automationwolf.com. It's spelled exactly what it sounds. It just says automationwolf.com. There's a great video on there that explains our entire strategy that's not gated, that if you want to even take it and copy it, you could, or if you just need some help implementing, I'd be happy to hear from you.
I love that video as well. I've watched that a few times. I like it. It cuts to the chase. I love it. But thank you very much for coming on, and yeah, we'll speak soon.
Thanks for having me, James. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Matthew.